Hi, it's Graham Rawlinson here, and this is just a little replay of a webinar I did recently for IN2IN thinking on team brains. So I'm going to record some of the ideas that I was working through in that webinar, and if you've got any questions you can get in touch with me, and the contact will be at the end of the webinar. So my talk this time was on team brains. Team brains meaning that when we're working together, we're actually connected not by some kind of mental telepathy, but by the fact that our ideas are heavily embedded in each other's minds. And the more we know each other, the more that is true. So my talk was really about understanding how this kind of group mind develops, and what its benefits are, and what are the weaknesses. The webinar was on the 9th of May and can be found on the in2inthinking.org website. Again, contact details will be provided later. Previous work on this with IN2IN and our other workshops have led to books on how to advise the president, how to invent almost anything, co-authored with David Straker, who runs Changing Minds website, if you want to have a look at that, on all sorts of things to do with thinking. And another book, Judgment Day. That's the long one, but it's a novel, so it's an easy read. And it is about thinking. Okay, so where do we start in terms of team brains? Well, what we really need to start with is the idea about multiplicity. It's an idea that's been around a long time. One could even say since Plato and Socrates. But certainly William James, who's one of the founders of psychology itself, was interested in multiplicity, and the latest book, Rita Carter, amazing author on all things to do with the brain and consciousness and so on, she's written a book called Multiplicity. And what multiplicity means is not that we have some kind of freakish number of selves which sort of take over our lives, but that our multiple selves are useful and efficient and effective when they're working well together, and actually they're sort of developed as part of our sort of ecological mental process. Multiplicity means that our different selves switch from one to another. It's a little bit like when your car, you switch it from sports mode to economy mode, and it changes all kinds of aspects of the car which makes it drive differently. And that's what we're doing with multiplicity. We're switching our motives, and as we switch our motives, we switch our memories, and as we switch our memories, our skills switch too. So you can think of it a little bit like animals in a pack. They can all be sitting down together, being playful and so on, and then the leader may sort of kind of indicate that it's time to go hunting, and they will all switch into pack motif, and the persona will be a pack persona, and it won't switch out of that until there's some other event which will trigger a switch into a different kind of mind. So that's what multiplicity is about. It's about the fact that we do usefully have different selves. In some senses, maybe we say we have a work self, but in some senses, maybe your family self will intervene in your work day, and maybe your work self will intervene in your family day, and so on. So inside me and inside you and everybody else, there's many me's, and what I'm encouraging, and what others would be encouraging, including Robert Keegan, who's giving a talk at the RSA soon. The many me should be thinking about the many me. So I need to think about how one of my selves thinks about another self, and then on reflection the other self thinks about this self, and so on. And why should I do that? Because it's useful. It's useful to avoid being stuck into one kind of self. And all this is important in relation to how we understand decision making. Representation I did at a California conference was decision making seems to be, as we look into how the brain works, it's a little bit like traffic in Paris. That we might control some of the traffic lights. We might even stick a policeman on a corner with a whistle and arms waving. But by and large, the traffic is a lot of independent systems and will kind of get its way through or not, efficiently or not efficiently, according to the kind of local whims and the general sort of systems and ecosystems that develop in the passing of traffic through Paris. And that's actually more what is going on in the decision-making of your brain than some idea that there's a sort of me, a Buzzy, as represented in a Disney World at one point. There's somebody inside my brain which is controlling my decisions. Well, there isn't. My decisions are happenings, are events. They're not things I directly control. And the decision making, well, so it just is an outcome. It's a set of events, but it is altered by judgment, and judgment are the kind of higher level systems. But even those, they happen to you, and they will be influenced by which you is operating at the time. So your judgments at one time will somehow create an environment which leads to some kinds of decisions, and if you switch to another you, then your judgment will lead to different kind of outcomes on a probabilistic basis. Nothing is certain in your decision making. Some kind of weird, gosh, I think I'll go and do that occasionally happens, and maybe that's good for you to stop you getting in a rut as well. When I've been going through thinking about all these things, then what I realized was that context was very, very important. And what I tried to do in the book, How to Advise the President, was to think about the kind of different kind of contexts that would be important when we think about our thinking, when we think about our multiplicity and our decision-making and judgment, or the judgment that occurs, the decision-making that occurs. One of the ways of reflecting on that, oneself reflecting with another, is, I put it, 4 different aspects of context. The first is, are you looking at a situation, are you involved in a situation which is more to do with collaboration, or is it more to do with competition? Because by and large, the kind of thinking processes that work well in collaboration are not going to be quite the same as those in competition. For example, if you've got a situation where you really need other people on board for quite a complex outcome, say maybe trying to involve the community in reducing crime on the streets, then it's no good saying, well, okay, I'll set up a lecture, and what we'll do is we'll have competing authorities on what to do, and these people will set out brilliant exposés of what works and what doesn't work in reducing street crime. But the people at the audience won't be involved, and therefore you won't get a collaborative outcome. You'll just get a kind of, yeah, well, everybody thinks this idea is the winner and we'll vote for that. But they won't be part of the solution. So thinking about how you evolve and develop ideas and develop plans, it's a good idea to think about whether you want collaboration or whether you want competition. If you're a maker of a very singular kind of product or simple set of products like a mobile phone, then actually at times competition may work very well. You set different teams up in the company and you say, okay, and we're really going to push every limit here because only the winning idea, winning team is going to result in a particular type of product outcome. And that can be very good because it can really push the boundaries. Competition is very good for going further than you went before. But it won't create collaboration except within that competitive team. So it's never one or the other. It's never collaboration without competition. It's never competition without collaboration. But it's worthwhile thinking about how you want to think about how you're thinking, whether it is collaboration or competition. Second context aspect is risk. Is it catalytic or is it progressive? Now, catalytic risk is where If something goes wrong, everything collapses. So when you build a house of cards, take one out and suddenly they all collapse. There's sort of energy in the system which is ready to break everything down. And you want different kind of thinking for catalytic risk than you do for progressive risk. Progressive risk is where, well, okay, you know, I'm on a journey, maybe I'm traveling through Southeast Asia, but basically I don't need to get anywhere on an exact date or time. And if things go wrong a bit, I can kind of work them up to go right a bit as I go on my journey. So that means in a progressive risk situation, I can afford to be creative, I can afford to be watchful and intuitive in my responses to the environment. But intuition won't necessarily work very well if you've got a catalytic risk situation, because you may just miss what's going to bring the whole thing down. And particularly if you're motivated to a certain type of outcome, your mind's going to kind of wander you away from seeing catalytic risk because it's too scary. So you might need a lot of analysis, a lot of analytical thinking, a lot of left brain work to do the catalytic thinking, whereas you need a right brain. Well, it's useful to have a right brain working if you've got progressive risk. Again, not one or the other, it's using your thinking about thinking to say how much catalytic thinking, how much analytic thinking should I do for a catalytic situation, or vice versa. Third context is complexity versus simplicity. There's pretty good evidence, really. Gerd Gigerenzer, in his book Gut Feelings, summarizes it quite well. If you have a complex situation, then actually intuition tends to work better. And the reason is simply that what your brain tends to do when you have too much data is it tends to use bits of data because it can't handle it all. And then those bits of data swing a decision in the wrong way. So, simple situation, then you can use analysis, then you can use left brain, and you can use simple visualizations which assist your intuition, if you like. But by and large, if you've got a complex situation and it can't be reduced to a simple situation, then you really need to work on your complexity with an intuitive set of thinking processes. If you can reduce your complexity to a simple construction of a situation, that's not a bad idea. And certainly the process called TRIZ, Theory of Inventive Problem Solving, by Altshuler is probably the best tool around, or toolkit around, to reduce complexity to simplicity. Well worth doing if you have complex things that need good outcomes. Finally, in terms of context, there's stage of development of projects. So, are you in the early stages of a project? If so, you can usefully use a lot of right brain intuitive thinking, do lots of creative thinking elements in the early stages of a project. As you go through, you use creative thinking purely if you get stuck somewhere near the end of a project and you need to deliver, and analytical thinking isn't finding your solution, then you can be creative at the end of the project. But by and large, you want left brain thinking, you want a plan, you want a system, you want delivery, and your thinking about your thinking needs to be balanced in different ways in the early stages of a project to the later stages. Okay, and that's the end of part 1, and the remaining part of the webinar will be on additional videos. I am providing contact details here and references to the various sources of information I've mentioned. So I hope you go to the webinar part 2, and I look forward to seeing you there. Bye for now.